Right, we'll call the select board meeting to order. And given I'm not in the room, I'm going to turn this one over to Larry again.
All right, well, we're here to hear from the public.
Do we need to approve agenda?
Do we need to?
We do have, just because we warned it as a regular as well, that there's a public comment, a short one for anything not on the agenda.
Oh,
And then
okay.
the approval of the agenda, just to make sure. We probably don't need to do them for this scenario, but it's better safe than sorry.
Should we start with that then?
So public comment would be
Or-
next, yeah.
Okay,
Anything not on the agenda.
sorry.
No, thank you.
I don't think anybody's interested in that. So an approval of the agenda, and you don't have any changes, it's just the info meeting.
So moved.
I second.
Favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
And now,
Now we can move to
you're there.
the whole point of the meeting.
So
So we'll entertain comments or questions from the public on the budget.
Okay, I have one little question, just a little one.
can you just identify yourself so when we do the minutes,
Sure, Crystal Courier. I live on Greenhouse Avenue. I just wanted to know, I have the budget from last year and this year, and I just wanted to know why the ambulance budget, I don't see it on last year's, but it's 415 this year, and I just wondered, was it mixed in with some other budget here?
It's been in the general fund for years. It's going to move to a separate article this year. This is in part through the last 3-4 fiscal years. The increases have been sort of larger than other general fund increases. So the idea the board had was to split it out so the voters could do it directly. So when you look at the summary table, you'll see at the very bottom on it's a little small here, but there's the 3 years. So it shows you kind of the trend line, at least across the last 3 years of the requests.
Okay.
And it's gone up, what do we say, $105,000 in 4 years or something like that.
And is that, so when someone calls an ambulance, their insurance doesn't pay it, or?
It can. They have a billing mechanism. Sometimes it's not collected. Sometimes maybe they don't bill. Maybe there's other circumstances going on. But they rely, being Wervis, rely on basically a per capita rate from the member towns as well. So we pay Bethel, Braintree.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So it's a mix of funding, but they do some billing, some other funds, and some town contributions.
Just seems like a lot. But I don't know what to compare it to, so, okay, just curious.
They also have 24/7 staffing too, so like they're on call all the time, and I think, what's that?
They're running 2 crews nowadays.
2 crews, yeah.
So it's not just one, like especially on the overnights, they're running the 2 crews 24/7.
Yeah, and sometimes they'll get called out, and if someone denies service, then they drove there for and they couldn't bill it, right?
Right, because they may have to sign off if they're not being transported to a facility, but if they get canceled en route, they're not getting billed they're not getting money for their services.
So that's what covers that?
And a lot of it, my assumption, I wish we had a representative here, but we don't, in regards to what does that actually cover. My assumption is more of the staff costs than anything else, is my assumption, but again.
I was just curious.
I did go as the not quite Randolph rep when they were doing their budgeting, because we don't have a rep for that board. Well, is it a rep for the board? I guess it's for the board. And they also had some weird financial thing where they were underfunded for a couple of years, and they're trying to dig out of that hole. So kind of.
We could use a representative.
Yeah.
I
They have monthly
haven't
meetings.
needed it, but I
It's a
just
very
thought,
nice group.
I just thought insurance paid for it, so, but I didn't know.
So Crystal, that was one of the concerns we had and why we separated it out. If you want to look at a comparable, the Berry Town has an ambulance service. And if you compare it to White River receives about 50% of their budget from the member communities. Berry Town receives only about 20% from the member communities. So.
Well, I don't know, we compare it to White River though, do we? or Barry, they're both towns that have a lot more going on than we do. So is there a comparable town? Because those two, I would never consider anything like Randolph.
Berrytown provides a lot of service to surrounding towns.
Yeah, but separate out the number of people from the billing ratio. The billing ratio could be constant across service size in terms of whether it's 50% community funded, 50% billing, or 80% billing, 20% community funded. Those ratios could stay constant even if the populations were, until you probably scale out to a much higher size than what we're talking about.
Okay. Makes sense.
Anybody from the Zoom world?
Oh, John Kaplan
John?
has raised his hand.
Go ahead, John.
Good evening, John Kaplan. I am curious about the capital budget. I didn't see anything about the capital budget in this year's town report, and I don't know if I feel like it has been in the town report in the past. And I guess I'm putting in a plug for including it in the future. I just think it would be good information for people in town to have. And I'm assuming that, unless I misunderstand how it works, like each of the different capital, like reserve funds, they all have like a particular balance based on whatever has gone in there in previous year expenditures and so forth. I just feel like that would be good information for the public to have.
We can work on that. We're still wrapping up the 24 audit. Some of the reserve balances will be tied into that. Some of that we're finding the flood of 23 and the response to it. As the rate of reimbursement's been slowed, it makes the reserves for some of the categories look different than they might in a normal set of years. We're just trying to sort through what those reserve balances are so that we don't create a capital plan to try to implement it. And it turns out the money for us in transit. So it's a little slower development this year than in other years. For those factors, we have included it, at least the 1 year page in years past.
Yeah. Is that something that we can have online?
But yeah, we could eventually put it online. We'll sit with some of the pieces today, but I don't expect looking at the initial draft list there's going to be anything too wild or too different. We've been pretty aggressive across categories in recent years, so what you might see is a bit of a pullback what we rate for, so reserve funding reimbursements to cycle sort out. And we also try to time up, so for example, not this summer, but the summer after, so when the class 1 paving is going to happen with V-Trans, we'll have some project components that we'll either try to tie in timing wise or might be part of that project. So we're also trying to make sure we take things like that and make sure they're taken into account whatever we do. Sidewalk inventory is underway, that'll dictate work, so we'll, like we did last year, set aside a certain amount of money to go toward repairs, and we'll use that inventory to kind of try to guide sections. So we're still gonna do what we've been thinking about doing in Express last year, but probably in a little bit of a simplified version for this next fiscal year, then as we build out from there. But it's just a different year than others, but we've been able to replace equipment through just different methods through the years. We've done some stuff with ARPA funds that otherwise would have been big dollar ones. And then at some point we're going to have conversations about the other big things that are out there. Fire trucks and buildings primarily, but not in this next cycle for sure. Excuse me.
Thank you.
Other folks? Not seen any other questions or comments? Thoughts from the board before we wrap up? Or from anybody else in the room?
I have concerns about something that might affect us next year's budget. With the legislation going on, I don't know if that is part of this year.
They can reappraisal fund or.
Yeah, so House Ways and Means last week put up a bill in response to the Act 68 in 2023, where the report from PVNR and all the reports they got from VCGI and IAAO saying the reappraisal districts, they want to divide the state into reappraisal districts, and lo and behold, they almost match up to these education districts they're speaking about. So last week, House Ways and Means released, and so yeah, there's some space between last week and the Senate, but they want to move it fast without a working group. So everyone said, if you're going to do this, we need a working group to make sure this works, to move us into reappraisal districts. So instead of having me as your town assessor or your board of listers, they would have a district assessor taking over the whole county. And then there'd be, that person's hired from the state, but the staff under that might be hired from the municipalities. And it's, they haven't explained how the municipalities would pay for that, right? So like, would you lose your board of listers, you lose your assessor, and now you and the other towns in your county are now paying together for these services. And I don't know, if we can't even get like local services paid, how are you gonna do it, right? Like, it might affect our budget, because they also said in 2027, anything that we have in the reappraisal reserve fund, they're gonna take over. And that our 5-year statistical that we were planning on, that we put money away for, we might actually have to have a full reappraisal. So instead of saving $100,000 for 5 years, in 6 years, we might need to have, our last reappraisal cost $208,000. And the state in this bill still said they're only paying $8.50 per parcel, active parcel. So that could change a lot of like how we're putting money away, if we should be putting money away. Like, in one sense we have to, because by law, by statute, we have to have a 6-year reappraisal now. Our statistical might not count. But by statute, they also might take away our reappraisal fund and put it towards the state coffers in 2027. So it's not something to think about now, but by this next year, it's something we really should have in mind. And it will affect you. If you lose me, then you're in charge of how are you gonna pay this new assessor given to us by the state of Vermont for this district. And I've got this town, I'm not gonna be humble right now, but I've got this town in a really good spot and really efficiently run. And so what about towns that aren't there yet, who have all this institutional knowledge and they lose that person? So if they're gonna go by population or grand list or efficiency of town, but it's gonna be your problem and Tammy's problem, how you pay for whoever's doing this work. So.
We did boost the reappraisal reserve transfer about 15,000, so we went from 10 to 25, knowing that would be more expensive the next time out anyway, but we may want to even
boost it more
at a minimum hedge.
Yeah, it's not worked out, but they,
uncertainty.
yeah, that's going with what's going on right now. That's actually in law, what we're doing. But what they want to put into law and not go with the working group, and the working group needs to be assessors, select board members, town clerks, people who are going to be bothered with this, but they want to follow it with the education districts, if that goes through or not. So it's something to be really thinking about, because it could cost you guys more. We're like one of the biggest, or the biggest town
In the county.
in the county. So who's going to get most of that burden, do you think? Like, so that's money that we really need. It's not like the little, oh, it's only going to affect taxpayers a little bit. Like, I don't think it's going to affect our taxpayers a little bit if this goes through. as designed. But this, we'll need a 6-year, possibly my statistical that we're planning for might not count. That's part of it too. So,
Thanks, Mimi.
you're welcome.
Right. Well, if there's no other comment or questions, entertain a motion.
Larry, are they taking any more testimony on that? That bill? It would seem to me that if the state is the one that's after those property values to be assessed so quickly, and the majority of the hit on our grand list is for the education fund, which the state controls how that number is generated, they should be paying for all these appraisals.
You would think. I'll give you a copy of the bill, Trini, if you want.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem like that's very fair for them to control everything and then say to the town, here, but you pay for it. And we're, you know, now that we're gonna do a bigger region, oh, by the way, Randolph. You know, the same way as they play with a county budget, we get hit. We're gonna get hit with this in a disproportionate manner with not a whole lot of say in it. That just doesn't seem right to me. I mean, it comes back to this whole thing with the ambulance line item we were talking about earlier. Maybe we get hit for a huge portion of that too, like somewhere it would seem to me like when our budget at the town level is such a small piece of it, if the state wants these reassessed more often, they ought to be doing it.
But they don't wanna pay for it.
But then they talk about having a surplus in the general fund, so I would think they were the better ones equipped to pay for it. They control what we can do and how we can raise money. But. Okay.
Guess we're done. Motion to
Motion to adjourn, then.
Second.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hey.
We're adjourned.